The handcuffs bit into Samuel's wrists like the cold bite of winter wind off Lake Michigan. But he didn't flinch as the judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot in the stale air of the Elgin County Courthouse. "Guilty until proven innocent," the prosecutor sneered from across the room, his voice dripping with the kind of small-town venom that had chased Samuel out of closets and into quiet corners for decades. In that frozen moment, as flashbulbs popped and whispers slithered through the gallery like snakes in the grass, Samuel's eyes locked on his son Frank, 18 years old, fists clenched white-knuckled on the wooden bench, tears carving rivers down cheeks that still held the softness of boyhood. Frank's voice shattered the silence first, not with a scream, but a whisper that echoed louder than any thunder. "Dad, you didn't do this." "I know you didn't." And in that instant, the courtroom, stuffy with the ghosts of old grudges and fresh betrayals, held its breath, waiting for the truth to claw its way out from the shadows Samuel had buried deep in his Midwestern heart. Samuel Harlan had always believed that love was like the endless cornfields stretching out from their little farmstead in rural Illinois. Vast, unyielding, and full of hidden roots that could trip you up if you weren't careful. At 45, with calluses etched into his palms from years of tending soil that never quite gave back as much as it took, he still woke before dawn to the scent of earth and coffee, the same routine that had anchored him since he was a boy dodging his father's belt in the dim light of their clapboard house. But love, that was the wild card, the storm that rolled in from the west without warning, leaving everything uprooted. It started innocently enough, or so Samuel told himself in the quiet hours when regret gnawed at him like a persistent ache. He was 37 then, freshly divorced from Elaine after a marriage that had been more habit than heat, their union a fragile bridge built on the expectations of a town where family man meant Sunday potlucks and little league coaching, not the dreams that kept Samuel staring at the ceiling long after the lights went out. Frank had been 10, all gangly limbs and wide-eyed curiosity, asking questions Samuel could answer about baseball stats, but not about why his parents slept in separate beds, or why Daddy sometimes drove 2 hours to Chicago just to clear his head. That head clearing had led him to the Blue Note, a dimly lit jazz bar tucked into the shadows of Wrigleyville, where the air hummed with saxophone wails and the clink of glasses drowned out the world's judgments. Samuel had gone there once, twice, a dozen times, nursing a whiskey and letting the anonymity wrap around him like a worn flannel. It was on a rainy Tuesday in October, leaves slapping wet against the windshield as he parked his rusted Ford pickup, that he met Alex. Alex Rivera was everything Samuel wasn't. 28, with the easy swagger of someone who'd grown up in the sprawl of Los Angeles before chasing stories to the Windy City. A freelance journalist with ink-stained fingers and a laugh that cut through the bar's haze like sunlight through fog. He slid onto the stool next to Samuel and ordered a gin and tonic, his dark eyes flicking over with casual interest. "You look like a man carrying the weight of the world," Alex said, his voice smooth as the jazz riff floating from the stage. "Or at least the weight of this stool, it's got a wobble." Samuel chuckled, the sound rusty from disuse, and before he knew it, they were talking about the Cubs' latest slump, the way the city lights reflected off the Chicago River like scattered diamonds, and then, haltingly, about the loneliness that settled in your bones after the kids went to bed and the house echoed with silence. Alex listened, really listened, his head tilted just so, fingers tracing the rim of his glass. When the bar called last orders, Alex slipped a napkin across the bar with his number scrawled in sharp, looping script. "Call me," he said, his hand brushing Samuel's for the briefest second, sending a spark that lingered like the aftertaste of good bourbon. Samuel didn't call for 3 days. He mowed the lawn twice, fixed the fence post that had been leaning since spring, and lay awake replaying that touch until it burned. On the fourth day, with Frank at school and the farm quiet under a slate-gray sky, he dialed. Their first date was at a diner off Route 88. Plates of greasy eggs and hash browns between them, Alex's knee pressing against Samuel's under the formica table. Not accidental, not probing, just there. Promise. What followed was a whirlwind Samuel hadn't known he was starving for. Weekends stolen in Alex's cramped apartment overlooking the Loop, where they'd cook paella from recipes Alex swore were authentic, though Samuel suspected they came from a dog-eared cookbook, or walk hand in hidden hand through Grant Park as the sun dipped low, painting the skyline in hues of fire. Alex taught him to love without apology, to whisper "I love you" into the curve of a neck without the world crashing down. Samuel, in turn, showed Alex the rhythm of the land, the way to plant soybeans so they caught the morning dew just right, the quiet satisfaction of a harvest moon rising fat and golden over the fields. Frank noticed, of course. Kids always do. "Who's that guy on the phone? Dad?" he'd ask, sprawled on the living room rug with his comic books, his brown eyes mirror images of Samuel's, sharp with unspoken questions. Samuel would ruffle his hair, call it a friend from the city, and steer the conversation to homework or the upcoming county fair. But Frank was perceptive, piecing together the late nights, the new flannel shirts hanging crisp in the closet, the way Samuel's face lit up like the dashboard of the truck at dusk. It was Alex who pushed for more. "Tell him," he'd urged one night, tangled in sheets that smelled of salt and sweat, his fingers tracing the scars on Samuel's back from a lifetime of hard labor. "He's your son. He deserves to know the man you are." Samuel had nodded, throat tight, but the words stuck like burrs in wool. How do you explain to a boy on the cusp of manhood that your heart beats for someone who shares your shadows, not the ones society painted in broad, unforgiving strokes? The unraveling began subtly, like the first frost nipping at the edges of summer. Alex's articles started appearing in the local paper, exposés on corruption in Elgin County, spotlights on the underbelly of small-town politics. He was good, too good, ruffling feathers among the old guard who ran the feed store and the Chamber of Commerce like their personal fiefdoms. Samuel admired it, the fire in Alex's words, but worry gnawed at him. "Be careful," he'd say over stolen dinners. Fork paused midway to his mouth. Alex would grin, that reckless tilt to his lips. "Truth's worth the bruises, Sam. You know that." Then came the night of the fire. It was mid-June, the air thick with humidity and the buzz of cicadas, when Samuel got the call at 2 a.m. Frank stirred in his room as Samuel fumbled for the phone, heart slamming against his ribs. "Mr. Harlan, this is Deputy Klein. There's been an incident at the old mill on Elm Street." Alex's voice crackled through the line next, strained but steady. "I'm okay, babe. Just smoke inhalation. Chasing a lead, thought I saw something off." Samuel was in the truck before he hung up, Frank's sleepy protests fading in the rearview as he sped toward the county line. The mill was a skeleton of rusted beams and shattered windows, a relic from Elgin's manufacturing heyday, now a haunt for teenagers and ghosts. Fire trucks wailed, red lights pulsing like wounds against the night. Alex stood on the periphery, soot-streaked and coughing into a blanket, his eyes finding Samuel's across the chaos. "Idiot," Samuel murmured, pulling him close, the embrace fierce and unyielding. But as the flames died to embers, Whispers started, neighbors murmuring about that reporter stirring trouble, eyes narrowing at Samuel as if his association was a stain. Weeks later, the betrayal landed like a scythe through wheat. Samuel came home from the co-op to find Frank hunched over the kitchen table. The local gazette spread open like a gutted fish. The headline screamed, "Local farmer linked to arson cover-up?" Below it, a grainy photo of Samuel at the fire scene, Alex blurred in the background. The article and signed, but Samuel knew the poison pen of Harlan Jenkins, the county prosecutor who'd lost his re-election bid years back and never forgiven Alex's reporting on the scandal, was a tapestry of half-truths. Anonymous sources claiming Samuel had tipped off Alex about illegal dumping at the mill, implying a kickback scheme to silence whistleblowers. Samuel's stomach plummeted. "It's lies, son. All of it." Frank looked up, face pale as milkweed, voice small, then wise mister. Alex not answering his phone, because Alex had left that morning for a quick trip to Springfield, promising to call from the road. The silence stretched, a chasm widening between them. That night, as thunder rumbled over the fields, Samuel drove to Alex's apartment, keys shaking in the lock. Empty. Drawers half-packed. A note on the fridge. "Had to go. Too hot here. Love you, don't follow." The knife twisted deeper when the deputies came, badges glinting under the porch light like false stars. "Samuel Harlan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson and obstruction of justice." Frank watched from the doorway, barefoot in his pajamas, as they cuffed his father and read rights that rang hollow in the humid air. Samuel said nothing, jaw set like the granite bluffs along the Mississippi, eyes fixed on the horizon where lightning forked silent and blue. In the squad car, bouncing over gravel roads toward the Elgin lockup, Samuel replayed it all, the touches, the laughs, the promises whispered in the dark. Betrayal wasn't just Alex's flight. It was the realization that love, for all its roots, couldn't always withstand the storms of fear. And as the courthouse loomed, a squat brick fortress against the dawn, Samuel vowed silence. Let the lies bury him. He'd protected his son from worse shadows already. But Frank's voice in his head echoed like a lifeline he wasn't sure he deserved. The holding cell smelled of bleach and despair, a concrete box with a cot that sagged like old regrets and a fluorescent buzz that drilled into Samuel's skull. He sat on the edge, wrists chafed raw from the cuffs they'd finally removed, staring at the graffiti-scratched walls, names, dates, pleas for mercy scratched by hands that had come before his. Sleep evaded him, chased away by the what-ifs. What if he'd never called that number on the napkin? What if he'd stuck to the safe script of father, farmer, ghost of a husband? But deeper, sharper, was the ache for Frank, his boy, left alone in that creaking house with nothing but a freezer full of casseroles from well-meaning neighbors and a phone that now rang with reporters instead of school friends. By morning, the public defender assigned to him, a harried woman named Rita with coffee stains on her blouse and a no-nonsense bob, shuffled in with a stack of papers. "This is bad, Mr. Harlan. Jenkins is gunning for you. Says you've got motive tied to that reporter boyfriend of yours." She said it matter-of-fact, no judgment in her tired eyes, but Samuel flinched anyway. Boyfriend. The word hung there, exposed, like a secret yanked from a locked drawer. "It's not true," he said, voice gravel rough. "None of it." Rita nodded, jotting notes. "I believe you. But the evidence? Slim. Witnesses placing you at the fire, your truck, for one. And that note from Rivera? Looks like a getaway plan. Samuel's gut twisted. Alex's handwriting, so familiar from love letters folded into his glove compartment, now twisted into damning script. He left because he was scared, Samuel murmured, more to himself. For me. For us. Us. Rita arched a brow, then softened. Look, Illinois is blue enough for this not to be the dark ages. But Elgin is a time capsule. Jenkins will play the deviant dad card if he smells blood. You got family? Anyone to vouch? Frank. The name lodged in Samuel's throat like a stone. He'd signed the guardianship papers in a daze before they booked him. Rita's insistence, a formality for arraignment. But calling, asking his son to step into this mess? No. He's just a kid, Samuel said finally. 18 last month. Got his whole life. Rita leaned forward, elbows on the scarred table. Kids like that, they surprise you. Let him decide. But Samuel shook his head, the decision settling heavy as plow mud. Silence was his shield. He'd wield it like the pitchfork in the barn, keeping the wolves from Frank's door. Outside, the world churned on without him. Frank skipped school that first day, holing up in the barn with the old radio crackling static and country twang. The animals his only company. Bessie the cow lowing softly, as if sensing the fracture in their world. He'd always been the quiet one, more observer than participant, sketching maps of the stars in his notebook while other boys chased footballs across muddy fields. Samuel had called it his thinker's curse, ruffling Frank's hair with a grin. Now, alone, Frank traced the constellations in his mind, but they offered no answers, only vast, indifferent space. The phone rang at noon. Harlan Jenkins himself, voice oily as corn oil. Son, your pa's in a heap of trouble. Reckon you know why. Best you stay clear. Folks talk. Frank hung up without a word, heart pounding like a bass drum in his chest. By afternoon, the porch swarmed with locals, Mrs. Ellis from the library bearing lemon bars and pity, Pastor Hale quoting Leviticus with a Bible thump that echoed off the siding. The Lord tests us, Francis. Prayer might save your father's soul yet. Frank nodded politely, jaw clenched, but inside, anger simmered. A slow boil fed by years of half-heard whispers about his dad's city trips. The way classmates snickered when Frank corrected them that yes, his parents were divorced, but Dad was still the best man he knew. That evening, as fireflies winked in the gathering dusk, Frank dug out the shoebox from under his bed, Samuel's keepsakes, or so he'd thought. Mementos from the divorce. A pressed wildflower from their last family picnic, a ticket stub from the Illinois State Fair where Samuel had won Frank a stuffed bear bigger than his backpack. But tucked in the bottom, yellowed and folded tight, was a photo. Samuel and Alex, arms slung casual around shoulders, grinning at some Cubs game, the city skyline blurred behind them. Frank's breath caught. He'd seen Alex a handful of times. Dinners where the man spun tales of Hollywood backlots and Chicago riots, eyes lighting on Samuel like he was the only star worth watching. Frank had liked him, the way Alex asked about his drawings, not just the weather or grades. Now, the photo felt like a map to buried treasure or a bomb. Frank's fingers trembled as he slipped it into his pocket, resolve hardening. He wouldn't let the town chew them up. Not Dad. Not like this. Arraignment came on a Wednesday, rain lashing the courthouse windows like accusations. Samuel stood in the dock, orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame, the fabric itching against skin that still bore the scent of soil. The gallery murmured, farmers in John Deere caps, reporters with notepads at the ready, a smattering of protesters waving signs that read, "Justice for All," in rainbow ink. A small but fierce contingent from Chicago's activist scene who'd caught wind via social media. Jenkins rose, tie straight as a ruler, painting Samuel as the villain. A man who prioritized illicit liaisons over loyalty to his community. Your Honor. We have affidavits. Vehicle logs. Objection, Rita barked. But the damage seeped in, the word illicit lingering like smoke. Samuel kept his gaze forward, lips sealed, even as his mind screamed for Alex, for the man who'd promised forever in the quiet of midnight drives, only to vanish when the heat turned real. Then, the door at the back creaked open, and Frank stepped in, soaked to the bone, notebook clutched like a shield. He didn't sit, he marched down the aisle, ignoring the gasps, until he reached the bar. Your Honor, his voice cracked on the edges, but it carried, clear as a bell over the fields. The judge, a stern woman with silver streaks in her bun, peered over her glasses. Young man, he's my father, Frank cut in, turning to face the room, cheeks flushed but eyes steady. And he's innocent. I can prove it. Murmurs rippled, Jenkins's face twisting like curdled milk. Samuel's head snapped up, heart seizing. No, boy, run. But Frank held his ground, unfolding the notebook to reveal sketches, not stars, but timelines, dates of Alex's visits cross-referenced with Samuel's farm logs, notes on the mill's owners whispered to him by a chatty deputy uncle. Dad was there because Alex called him scared. Not for a payoff for help. The judge banged her gavel, but the hook was set. Approach the bench, Mr. Harlan's son. As Frank moved forward, Samuel caught his eye, a lifetime of unsaid words passing in that glance. Pride, fear, love unfiltered. For the first time since the cuffs clicked shut, Samuel felt the silence crack. Not break, but fissure, light seeping through. Outside, as bail was debated, denied, Rita later explained, Jenkins's influence thick as fog. Frank waited in the hall, dripping puddles on the linoleum. Reporters swarmed, but he brushed them off with a fierceness Samuel would have recognized from his own youth. My dad's a good man, he said simply, again and again. You don't know him like I do. Back in his cell that night, Samuel traced the bars with numb fingers, replaying Frank's stand. The boy, no. The man had spoken when he couldn't. But as dawn crept in, gray and unforgiving, Samuel wondered if the cost would be too high. Alex's absence loomed larger, a betrayal that festered, and the trial loomed like thunderheads on the prairie. Love had roots. Yes, but some storms uprooted everything. The days blurred into a monotonous grind for Samuel, each one marked by the clang of cell doors and the distant hum of the jail's rec yard, where inmates traded stories like contraband cigarettes. He kept to himself, volunteering for kitchen duty to scrub pots until his hands pruned, the rhythmic scrape a meditation that drowned out the jeers from the block's loudmouths. Heard you like the boys, Harlan. One sneered through the bars, a burly guy with a swastika tat creeping up his neck. Samuel met his gaze steady, said nothing, but inside, the old shame flickered, fought back by memories of Alex's hand in his, warm and sure under starlit skies. Letters came sporadically, smuggled past the censors by Rita's grit. Notes from farmhands covering the harvest. Card from Mrs. Ellis with a pressed leaf and a verse from Psalms. Frank's were the lifeline. Scribbled on lined paper torn from his notebook. Updates on the cows. Bessie's milking fine. But she misses your whistle. The house. Fixed the leaky faucet. YouTube tutorial. Don't laugh. And the town. Folks are talking. That. Some good. Some ugly. Ignore the ugly. No mention of school, though. Frank had dropped out of senior year, channeling his fire into library research, piecing together the mill's tangled ownership like a detective in one of those noir films Samuel pretended not to like. But the romance, that fragile bloom, wilted in Samuel's chest. He'd loved Alex fiercely, with the kind of abandon that comes from denying yourself too long. Picnics by the Fox River, where Alex read poetry aloud, Walt Whitman, all that barbaric yawp that made Samuel blush and laugh. Drives to Starved Rock, hiking trails hand in hand when no one watched. Alex's head on Samuel's shoulder as they watched eagles wheel overhead. "You're my anchor," Alex had said once, voice thick with something deeper than lust. In this crazy world lies, Samuel thought now, or maybe just fears dressed as truth. The note, the empty apartment, it stung like salt in a fresh cut, betrayal not in the act, but in the abandonment. Had Alex ever believed in them, or was Samuel just a chapter, a Midwestern detour on the road to bigger stories? Rita brought news on Fridays. Her visits a ritual of stale vending machine coffee and legal pads filled with motions. "Jenkins is building a house of cards," she said one week, tapping a file. "But it's got your name on it. They're subpoenaing your phone records, those late-night calls to Rivera." Samuel nodded, the weight settling heavier. "And Frank? He's digging, Sam. Kid's got a knack. Found old EPA reports on the mill dumping violations tied to the mayor's brother-in-law. If we link it, but the ifs piled up like unharvested corn." The real blow came mid-July, heat wave turning the jail into a sweatbox, when Rita slid a manila envelope across the table. "From your son. Don't shoot the messenger." Inside, printouts from a blog. Anonymous posts from Elgin Insider, spilling dirt on Alex, not just the fire, but a pattern. Bounce checks from past gigs. A restraining order from an ex in LA. Whispers of using sources for clicks. Not justice. Frank's note was terse. "Found this online. Thought you should know. Still love him?" Samuel's hands shook as he folded it away, the words blurring. Still love him? The question clawed at him through sleepless nights, unraveling the tapestry of their romance. Alex's laugh, now hollow, his touch, now suspect. Betrayal layered upon betrayal, first flight, now this shadow of deceit. Yet, in the fragments, Samuel glimpsed the man he'd fallen for. Flawed, fierce, fighting his own demons in a world that chewed up dreamers. Frank, meanwhile, burned brighter. He'd rallied a makeshift team, Lila from the library, a queer activist with a buzz cut and a law degree gathering dust, old Mr. Petrovich from the feed store, who'd lost a son to the county's indifference years back. They met in the barn after dark, lantern light casting long shadows as Frank paced, notebook open like a battle plan. The fire wasn't random, he insisted, jabbing at maps. Alex was on to something big, corporate polluters buying off locals. Dad got pulled in because he cared. Lila nodded, her eyes fierce. And because he's gay? Jenkins'll twist it into motive. Deviant influences corrupting honest folk. We counter with heart. Your story, Frank. You're the voice. Frank hesitated, the weight of it pressing. He wasn't out, not like Dad. Not yet. But the whispers followed him now. Harlan's boy, defending that lifestyle. At the gas station, pumps clicking like judgments. In the diner, forks pausing midair. But anger fueled him, a righteous fire inherited from Samuel's quiet steel. One night, after a dead-end lead left him punching hay bales till his knuckles bled, Frank climbed to the roof, the summer stars sprawling above like spilled milk. "Why'd you leave him?" he whispered to the absent Alex, tears hot on his cheeks. He deserved better. The preliminary hearing arrived like a freight train, barreling through the swelter of August. The courthouse swelled with spectators. More signs now, rainbows mingling with Free Harlan placards, counter-protesters hissing slurs from the steps. Samuel entered in shackles. The chains rattle a dirge, his eyes scanning for Frank amid the crush. There he was, front row, suit borrowed from Petrovich hanging loose, face set like flint. Jenkins opened with venom, parading witnesses. A mill worker claiming Samuel had asked questions weeks before the fire, implying foreknowledge. A neighbor who'd seen the truck, twisting proximity to conspiracy. "This man," Jenkins thundered, pointing like a prophet of doom, abandoned his duties as father and citizen for base desires. The gallery gasped, a ripple of old prejudices. Rita countered with facts, alibis, timelines, but it was Frank's testimony that ignited the room. Called as a character witness, he took the stand with knees knocking, hand on the Bible steady as he swore truth. "My dad's the best man I know," he began, voice gaining strength. "He taught me to stand up for the little guy, for what's right. That night, he went because someone he loved needed him. Not for money. For love." He met Samuel's gaze, unflinching. "And yeah, he loves a man. Alex, that doesn't make him guilty. It makes him brave." The words landed like rain on parched earth, murmurs shifting to nods. Jenkins cross-examined, probing, "You knew about this relationship? How's that sit with a boy your age?" Frank leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Better than lies. Better than watching my town eat its own." As Frank stepped down, Samuel's chest cracked open, emotion flooding the barriers he'd built. Pride swelled, tangled with grief, for the boy thrust into manhood's fire, for the love that had sparked the storm. But in the recess, as deputies led him away, Frank pressed against the rail, whispering fierce, "I got more, Dad. On Alex. On everything. Hold on." That night, in the cell's dim glow, Samuel wept. Quiet sobs for the romance shattered, the family fractured, the injustice gnawing like roots through stone. But Frank's words echoed, a beacon. The climax brewed, conflicts converging like tributaries to the Mississippi. And Samuel, for the first time, whispered a prayer not for silence, but for voice. September brought a crisp edge to the air, the kind that whispered of falling leaves and football Fridays. But for Samuel, it carried the bite of uncertainty sharpening toward desperation. The trial date loomed, set for mid-month, Jenkins pushing for swift justice like a man possessed, and pretrial motions flew like arrows in a skirmish. Rita fought tooth and nail, motions to suppress the phone records, to dismiss biased witnesses. But the judge, fair but fatigued, leaned toward the prosecution's narrative. Community interest, she ruled, her gavel a punctuation on Samuel's fraying hope. Visitation hours became Samuel's tether to the outside, glimpses through plexiglass of Frank's evolving resolve. The boy, no, young man, arrived each time more assured, hair combed back, carrying folders thick with printouts. Lila's got a contact at the EPA, he'd say, pressing the receiver close. They're reopening the mill case. And Alex. Dad, I tracked him. Samuel's pulse stuttered. Don't. Let it lie. But Frank shook his head, determination etching lines too early on his face. Can't. He owes you truth. Truth. The word haunted Samuel, a ghost of their romance's promise. In quieter moments, alone with the cot's thin blanket, he'd replay the arc of it, the spark at the Blue Note, the deepening, lazy Sundays mending fences together, Alex's fingers laced with his as they drove back roads, radio crooning Springsteen anthems about working-class hearts. Samuel had opened up, layer by layer, tales of his own youth, hiding crushes on the quarterback behind hay bales, the marriage to Elaine a desperate bid for normalcy that birthed Frank, their greatest gift and hardest trial. Alex had held him through it, murmuring, "You're enough, Sam. Just you." But cracks had shown. Subtle at first. Alex's late nights chasing deadlines, the way his eyes darted when Jenkins's name surfaced in conversation. Old grudge, Alex dismissed, but Samuel sensed the undercurrent, a fear that tainted their intimacy. The fire night crystallized it. Alex's call frantic, Samuel racing blind into danger, only to wake to headlines that smeared them both. And the flight? Samuel pieced it now. From Frank's leads, Alex, spooked by threats scrawled on his car, Jenkins's shadow looming, choosing escape over solidarity. Betrayal, yes, but born of terror, not malice. The nuance tortured him, love's embers refusing to die. Frank's quest deepened the wounds. Using Lila's laptop in the library's back room, he'd scoured digital trails. Alex's byline gone dark after Springfield, a trail leading to a dingy motel in Peoria, then silence. A contact, a former editor, spilled over burner phone. Rivera's burned out. Said something about protecting a source. Sound like your old man, Frank pressed. Voice steady, he's innocent. Help me find him. The editor hesitated. Then, kid. Truth's a double-edged sword. Be sure you want it. Frank wanted it for Samuel, for the unraveling family, for the town choking on its secrets. But doubt crept in during long nights, the house empty save for echoes. He'd cook Samuel's chili recipe, portions for one, the steam rising like ghosts of dinners passed with Alex at the table, spinning yarns that made Frank dream bigger than cornfields. Now, those memories soured, Alex's absence a void that echoed with what-ifs. Was it love or leverage? Frank journaled it out, pages filling with raw confession. His own stirrings, glances at boys in the diner that lingered too long, fears of inheriting Samuel's burdens in a world still half asleep to acceptance. The betrayal peaked on a Tuesday, Rita bursting into visitation with fire in her eyes. We got a problem. Jenkins subpoenaed Alex Rivera, wants him as a hostile witness. If he shows, she trailed off, but Samuel saw the abyss. Frank, listening via speaker, interjected, he won't. I talked to him last night. The line went dead quiet. Samuel's voice broke. "You what?" Frank confessed in halting breaths. "A motel payphone." Alex's voice ragged on the other end. "He says he's coming back. To testify. For you." Samuel's world tilted. Emotions crashing, relief, rage, a longing sharp as barbed wire. "Why now?" Frank's reply was soft. "Because of me." I told him what you wouldn't. That silence kills slower than lies. The trial opened under a sky bruised purple. Thunder grumbling distant threats. The Elgin County Courthouse, with its marble halls echoing footsteps like judgments, filled to bursting. Farmers shoulder to shoulder with activists bust from Chicago. TV crews jockeying for angles. Samuel entered last. Shackles removed for decorum. His flannel shirt, laundered but stiff, a nod to normalcy. He spotted Frank in the front, Lila at his side, their nods a silent vow. Jenkins's opening was a sermon of spite. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case isn't just about arson, it's about betrayal. A father who chose forbidden passions over family, over this community." Gasps. Nods from the jury box, holdouts from the old guard. Rita's response was steel. "My client is a victim of prejudice, of a vendetta. We'll show you the real fire. Corruption that burns brighter than any lie." Witnesses paraded. The mill hand, crumbling under cross like dry corn husk. The neighbor, admitting bias with a squirm. Then Alex, summoned, not voluntary, strode in on day 3. Thinner, I shadowed, but chin lifted. The gallery hushed as he took the stand. Samuel's heart a war drum. Jenkins pounced. "Mr. Rivera, you fled after the fire. Afraid of what your lover might do." Alex's jaw tightened. "Afraid of scum like you, Jenkins." Threatening calls. Slashed tires. I ran to draw heat off Sam. The courtroom erupted. Judge's gavel a thunderclap. Rita leaned in on redirect. "Tell us about the mill." Alex's testimony poured out. Leads on toxic waste. Bribes to silence locals. The fire as sabotage to bury evidence. Samuel knew nothing till I called that night. He came because he loves me. Loves hard. Without strings. His eyes found Samuel's. Apology raw in the lines of his face. I left to protect him. Stupid. Scared. But I'm here now. Tears pricked Samuel's eyes. The romance's ghost stirring. Forgiveness tentative. But there. Frank, watching from the bench, felt the shift. Not just vindication, but healing, a bridge mending. But Jenkins wasn't done. Closing arguments twisted Alex's words into complicity, painting Samuel as the puppet master. The jury retired as rain lashed the windows, deliberations stretching into evening, the air thick with held breath. Samuel waited in a side room, Frank slipping in for a hug that bridged the barrier, fierce, unspoken volumes. "You changed it, son," Samuel whispered, voice thick. Frank pulled back, eyes shining. "We did. Together." But as hours ticked, doubt gnawed, the climax hovering, conflict unresolved, the humanistic heart of their story teetering on the jury's scale. The verdict came at dawn. The jury foreman, a weathered woman with farm-wife hands, reading it in a voice steady as harvest chaff. Not guilty on all counts. The courtroom exhaled. A collective release like wind through wheat. Cheers mingling with sobs as Samuel stood, knees buckling, Rita's arm his anchor. Frank surged forward, barriers forgotten, wrapping his father in an embrace that smelled of rain and relief. the world blurring to just them, father and son, unbroken. But triumph tasted bittersweet, laced with the undercurrents of what had been lost. Jenkins slunk out, face ashen, whispers of his own reckoning brewing in the prosecutor's office. Alex lingered on the steps, crowd parting like Red Sea waters, his approach hesitant. "Sam," he started, voice cracking on the edges of regret. Samuel met his gaze. The love they'd built, a tapestry frayed but not torn, romance's embers glowing soft. "You came back," Samuel said simply. No accusation, just truth. Alex nodded, tears carving tracks. "For you. For us, if you'll have it." Frank watched, a pang twisting, jealousy not of Alex, but of the ease with which adults mended what youth still fumbled. His own heart, stirred by the trial's glare, wrestled shadows, crushes unspoken, a kiss stolen at a rally with a boy from the city contingent. Fleeting but electric. "It's okay, Dad," he murmured later, over pie at the diner, the three of them tentative in a booth. "Forgive him. Or don't. But live." The weeks that followed were amending, slow as stitching quilt patches. Samuel returned to the farm, the soil welcoming under his hands, but changed, eyes lifted more to horizons, voice steadier in town where nods replaced sneers. The mill scandal broke wide. Indictments for the mayor's kin, EPA sweeps uncovering barrels of sludge buried shallow. Alex's byline returned, co-authored with Lila, exposés that healed more than they harmed. Their romance reignited in fits, dinners by candlelight, walks where hands brushed open now, no hiding. But betrayal's scar lingered, a reminder. Love demanded courage, not just roots. Frank, meanwhile, navigated his own awakening. Re-enrolled in school, he founded a GSA club, meetings in the library with rainbow flags fluttering defiant. The first gathering drew 5, timid at first, but stories spilled, hidden texts, church shunnings, dreams deferred. Frank led with Samuel's quiet strength, his sketches now murals of acceptance on the community center wall. A boy named Theo, with freckles and a poet's lilt, attended the second meeting, their eyes locking over shared verses. "You're brave," Theo said after, under the harvest moon. Frank blushed, heart fluttering. Learned from the best, yet conflict simmered beneath the calm. Old ghosts resurfaced. Elaine, Frank's mother, calling from her new life in Arizona, voice laced with hindsight regret. "I knew, you know, about your dad. Should have fought harder." Her visit was awkward, coffee on the porch, air thick with unsaid apologies. But it knit a thread, family expanding not contracting. And Alex, trust rebuilt brick by brick. But Frank guarded Samuel fiercely, pulling him aside one crisp October evening as leaves skittered across the drive. "He hurts you again. He's gone." Blood's thicker. Samuel chuckled, pulling Frank into a side hug. "Noted, son. But love's not a ledger." They stood there, father and son, the farm's heartbeat steady around them, cows lowing, wind sighing through stalks. Samuel shared more than stories of his youth's isolation, the joy of Alex's light piercing it. "Being gay, it's not the whole of me, but it's part. And you make it all worth it." The climax crested unexpectedly. In the form of a town hall, Jenkins crashed. Uninvited, his re-election bid desperate. This Harlan circus divided us, he bellowed to a half-full Jim, sweat beading on his brow. The crowd shifted, murmurs rising. Then Frank stood, microphone in hand, voice amplified but heart bare. Divided? No. It showed us truth. My dad's no criminal. He's a man who loved honestly in a town that forgot how. Applause thundered, drowning Jenkins, who fled to booze. Samuel watched from the wings, chest swelling with a father's pride laced with sorrow. For the boy who'd shouldered too much, for the romance that had nearly cost them everything. That night, around the kitchen table, Alex across, Elaine on video call, Lila dropping by with pie, the family toasted not victory, but survival. Laughter flowed, stories weaving humanistic threads, forgiveness as strength, identity as bridge, not burden. But romance's drama lingered in quieter beats. Samuel and Alex drove to Chicago one weekend, the blue note unchanged, saxophone wailing welcome. Over whiskeys, confessions spilled, Alex's fears of inadequacy, Samuel's of unworthiness. I betrayed you by running, Alex admitted, hand over Samuel's. But I choose you now every day, Samuel squeezed back, tears unspoken. Then stay. Roots and all, Frank, sketching by lamplight back home, felt the echo, his own love budding with Theo, tentative kisses under porch lights, the world's judgments fading to background hum. Betrayal's shadow taught him resilience, emotion's depth, vulnerability's grace. As winter nipped the air, snow dusting the fields like forgiveness, Samuel stood on the porch, Alex's arm warm around his waist, Frank and Theo laughing inside over cocoa. The arrest, the silence, the son's voice, it had changed everything, not to perfection, but to a fuller humanity. In America's heartland, where storms passed and soil renewed, love endured not flawless, but fierce, roots delving deep. Spring unfurled gentle on the Harlan farm, dogwoods blooming pink against the greening fields, a quiet resurrection after winter's hush. Samuel moved through his days with a rhythm rediscovered, plowing under the vast Illinois sky, the tractor's rumble a meditation that soothed the scars. At 46 now, the lines around his eyes held more laughter than worry, etched deeper by the trial's forge but softened by mornings where Alex stirred beside him, coffee brewing in the kitchen below, Frank's footsteps thumping down the stairs with news of the day. Their romance had deepened in the aftermath, a slow burn tempered by fire's lessons. No grand gestures, just the steady cadence of shared chores, Alex trading his laptop for a hoe, learning the land's language as Samuel had once taught him the city's pulse. Evenings found them on the swing Samuel had built decades back for Frank's toddler swings, now creaking under adult weight, hands entwined as fireflies danced like errant stars. I almost lost this, Alex murmured one twilight, head on Samuel's shoulder. Samuel turned, kissing his temple soft. We almost lost each other. But here we are. Forgiveness wasn't erasure. It was choice, renewed daily, a humanistic vow in a world quick to judge. Frank thrived in the bloom, his senior year reclaimed with honors. The GSA Club a beacon drawing dozens, kids from farms and trailers, sharing stories that bound them tighter than blood. Theo became fixture, his poetry readings on the porch a ritual, Frank's sketches illustrating chapbooks they self-published at the library press. Their love was young, exploratory, stolen moments in the hayloft, whispers of futures beyond Elgin, but grounded in the example Samuel modeled, love as action, not ideal. Yet echoes of conflict lingered, subtle tremors reminding them of fragility. Jenkins's downfall came swift, an ethics probe sparked by Alex's final exposé, resignation in disgrace, the town exhaling collective relief. But not all wounds sealed clean. Whispers persisted in pews and diners, old-timers shaking heads over that Harlan business. Samuel faced it head-on now, volunteering at the community center, sharing his story at panels with Lila. Voice steady, "I stood silent once, out of fear. Don't. Speak your truth. It changes everything." The betrayal's ghost visited least in Frank, who confronted it headlong during a rare dinner with Elaine, her Arizona tan contrasting the pale Midwestern dusk. "You left us," he said. Fork paused over pot roast. No venom but clarity. Elaine's eyes welled. "I was scared too, of the town, of not fitting. But watching you fight for him, it woke me." She stayed a week, mending fences with garden talks and recipes, her presence a bridge to wholeness. Frank forgave, not for her, but for the space it freed in his heart, room for Theo's hand in his, for dreams of art school in Chicago, where skylines met stars. Climax's shadow fell soft now, in moments of quiet drama. A county fair where Samuel and Alex walked open, arms linked, ignoring stares. Frank's first public reading, voice trembling then soaring. Theo's proud gaze his anchor. Emotion crested in a family bonfire one June eve. Flames crackling as marshmallows charred. Stories looping like the smoke. Samuel spoke of the arrest silence, the court's thunder, Frank's voice as salvation. "You saved me, son." Frank shook his head, eyes reflecting firelight. "Nah. You taught me how." Alex added his piece, voice low, "I ran once. Won't again. This us. It's my story now." Laughter followed, then silence companionable, the night wrapping them in grace. No tragedy's final curtain, but a happy arc bending toward light, humanistic in its imperfection, American in its resilient grit. Years folded forward, seamless as seasons. Samuel and Alex married in a backyard ceremony, Frank officiating with a grin, rainbow banners fluttering beside the old oak. The farm expanded, a bed and breakfast for queer travelers, stories shared over Samuel's pancakes. Frank and Theo built a life in the city, gallery shows and poetry slams, weekend drives back with tales of triumphs. Samuel aged into grandfatherhood, adoptions, not blood, but love's extension, bouncing toddlers on knees callous still from earth. In quiet hours, Samuel reflected on the hook that started it. Cuffs cold, Frank's voice a clarion. It had unraveled them. Yes, betrayals bared, conflicts clashed, but rewove stronger. Threads of romance, emotion, humanity intertwined. Under endless corn skies, where storms passed and roots held, Samuel knew. Silence broken led to songs unsung no more. And so, in Elgin's gentle hold, they lived, not perfect, but profoundly. A gay dad's unjust arrest a catalyst, his son's words the change that echoed eternal.